Welcome to The Explainer. So, have you ever wondered why you can literally read every single finance book, perfectly optimize your spreadsheets, and yet still feel totally stressed out about money? Yeah, you're definitely not alone. We kind of just assume that being really smart or highly educated naturally protects us from bad financial decisions, right? But here's the wild part. Intelligence doesn't actually protect you from bias. It usually just hides it. Today, we're unpacking the hidden mental traps that are quietly sabotaging your wealth, using insights from the psychology of money. Let's jump right in. This brings us to the central question driving our explainer today. Why exactly do smart people make crazy money choices? Well, the answer is that personal finance is rarely, if ever, a strict math problem. It's actually a deeply emotional, highly behavioral game. We all love to think we're acting perfectly rationally, but as we're going to see, nobody is actually crazy. We're all just operating from our own uniquely shaped experiences. And this perfectly illustrates the massive paradigm shift we need to make today. We naturally tend to think money is all about spreadsheets, formulas, and pure cold math. But the reality? The reality is that our financial choices are entirely dictated by our emotions, our internal biases, and the teeny tiny sliver of the world we've personally experienced. Think about it. Two people can look at the exact same data, like a sudden market dip, and make completely opposite choices. Neither one is crazy. They're just looking at the world through totally different lenses. To understand those lenses, here's our roadmap for this explainer. We're going to navigate the four hidden psychological games your mind is actively playing with your money. First, the logic illusion. Second, escaping the ego trap. Third, surviving the investing ride. And finally, true wealth is freedom. All right, kicking things off with Section 1, the logic illusion, spreadsheets, luck, and risk. Here is a deeply uncomfortable truth. You can do absolutely everything perfectly right and still face financial failure. Just look at Bill Gates. Obviously, the guy is brilliant, but back in the 1970s, he just so happened to attend literally one of the only high schools in all of America that had a computer. That one in a million stroke of absolute luck completely changed his life. But then, on the flip side, we have Kent Evans. Kent was Gates' close friend, equally brilliant, equally obsessed with computers. But Kent tragically died in a mountaineering accident before even finishing high school. Another one in a million event, right? But this time it was risk, not luck. The big takeaway here is that outcomes are rarely fully in our control. And because of that, we really need to be careful about who we admire or try to copy. Because real life is just packed with unexpected luck and risk. Trying to be this perfect, calculating machine, it just doesn't work. As the author Morgan Housel points out, aiming to be mostly reasonable works way better than trying to be coldly rational. And why is that? Well, a purely rational spreadsheet doesn't feel stress. It doesn't panic during a terrifying market downturn. And it definitely doesn't compare its life to some influencer on Instagram. But you're human. A reasonable, flexible plan is going to survive real-world emotional temptations way better than a rigid, coldly rational one ever could. Moving right along to Section 2, escaping the ego trap, the danger of never enough. This brings us to a rather extreme cautionary tale. Think about Sam Bankman-Fried. This guy reached a net worth of $20 billion by the time he was 29. I mean, he had literally won the game. But the word enough just wasn't in his vocabulary. He endlessly chased more status, more control, more admiration, and ultimately lost absolutely everything quietly overnight. It's a stark reminder. When you never define what enough is, comparison simply has no ceiling. You just keep risking what you already have and need for things you don't have and frankly don't even need. And honestly, a huge chunk of this endless chasing stems from a psychological illusion known as the man in the car paradox. It works like this. We go out and buy these incredibly flashy luxury items, let's say a shiny Ferrari, specifically to impress other people. We think everyone is staring at us in absolute awe. But here's the secret. They aren't. They're just staring at the car and imagining themselves driving it. The actual driver might as well be invisible. Wealth essentially just becomes a mirror for other people's desires. Believe me, no one is as impressed with your stuff as you are. Which leads perfectly into one of the punchiest, most mind-blowing takeaways of this whole explainer. Spending money to show people how much money you have is literally the fastest way to have less of it. It's incredibly ironic, right? If your goal is to actually build wealth, draining your bank account to buy shiny things just to signal to people who, remember, aren't even paying attention to you is actually destroying the very wealth you're trying to build. So we really have to separate two vastly different concepts here. Looking rich is loud. It's the luxury watches, the fancy cars, the exotic vacations. It's spending loudly for that quick hit of short-term praise. But true being rich, that's silent. It's the financial assets that haven't been converted into stuff yet. It's the money you didn't spend. In fact, think of savings as just the gap between your ego and your income. Choosing the path of actually being rich means choosing long-term peace over short-term praise every single time. All right, on to Section 3, surviving the investing ride, enduring volatility and time. So let's say you do manage to save that money. You still have to know how to endure the absolute emotional roller coaster of investing it so that compounding can actually do its magic. See, most people look at market volatility, like a gut-wrenching 30% drop in their portfolio, as a fine, a punishment for doing something wrong. But successful investors, they completely reframe it. They see it as a fee, the required price of admission. Take Netflix, for example. It returned more than 35,000% between 2002 and 2018. But get this, it spent 94% of that time below its previous all-time high. The sheer discomfort of watching your money drop isn't a punishment. It's just the fee required to capture those massive gains. There is truly no free lunch here. And paying that fee is absolutely worth it when you look at the historical data. The probability of getting a positive stock market return over just 1 year is about 68%. Not bad. But over 10 years, it climbs to 88%. And over 20 years, it literally reaches 100%. Long-term optimism works, guys. But the catch is, you absolutely must have the emotional resilience to stop panicking at every pessimistic short-term headline and just let time do the heavy lifting. Speaking of time doing the heavy lifting, just look at this massive, massive number, $156 billion. Warren Buffett is incredibly wealthy, sure, but this staggering amount is what he made entirely after his 65th birthday. Wrap your head around that. He didn't get this rich just by being a brilliant stock picker. He got rich by starting early and stubbornly staying in the game for over 80 years. Time, far more than talent, is the single most powerful force in finance.
You can kind of picture compounding like planting an oak tree. In year 1, the growth is basically invisible. You might literally be sitting there wondering if you're making any progress at all. By year 10, okay, you've got a solid foundation. But by year 50, it is massive, imposing, and completely unshakable. Staying quietly in the game for decades will beat chasing those loud, quick wins every single time.
And here's another huge relief. You don't even have to be right all the time. In fact, Warren Buffett has owned hundreds of different investments, but almost all of his incredible wealth came from just 10 rare ones. Literally, just 10. In finance, these are called tail events. For example, his completely boring 1989 purchase of Coca-Cola turned into a massive compounder over the decades. It just goes to show you can be wrong half the time and still make an absolute fortune, as long as you survive long enough to catch a few of these rare, explosive tail events. Which brings up a really fascinating dynamic. Getting rich and staying rich are two entirely different games. Getting rich usually requires a lot of boldness, extreme risk-taking, and huge optimism. But staying rich? That requires the exact opposite. It requires caution, humility, and a laser focus on survival. You really need what we call a barbell personality. You hold hope in one hand to keep yourself invested, and fear in the other hand to ensure you build a margin of safety so you don't get completely wiped out by one bad break. This leads us perfectly into Section 4. True wealth is freedom. Redefining the ultimate goal. The absolute highest dividend money can ever pay is simply controlling your own time. Way back in 1981, a social scientist named Angus Campbell ran this massive, comprehensive study on happiness, and what he found was incredible. He discovered that having a strong sense of controlling your own life is a far more dependable predictor of happiness than literally any luxury item, salary size, or fancy status symbol. Deep down, we don't just want more stuff. What we really crave is the ability to wake up every morning and say, I can do whatever I want today. But to actually secure that level of freedom, you have to protect your finances from, well, yourself, specifically your future self. Psychologists call this the end of history illusion. See, we know we've changed a lot in the past, but we wildly underestimate just how much our goals and desires are going to change over the next 10 years. So the solution? It's pretty simple. Moderation. Build a margin of safety, avoid locking yourself into extreme financial commitments, and leave plenty of room for your life to naturally evolve. Plans built on moderation survive change. Extreme plans almost always end in regret. Another fatal trap to watch out for is taking financial advice totally out of context.
Think about it. The day trader values speed, timing, and momentum. The long-term investor values patience, endurance, and holding for decades. If you are a long-term investor and you suddenly decide to copy the hot stock tip of a day trader, you are adopting all of their risks without sharing any of their goals. Following the wrong advice just because you feel a little FOMO is seriously the fastest way to lose your wealth.
Let's tie this all together with this brilliant quote. Few things matter more with money than understanding your own time horizon and not being persuaded by people playing different games. Whether it's a coworker buying a luxury car to climb their specific corporate ladder or a day trader chasing the latest crypto hype, you have to define your own personal version of enough. Tuning out all that external noise and strictly sticking to your own rules is truly the only way to actually win. So I really want to leave you with this final provocative thought today. Take a hard look at your portfolio, look at your spending habits, and ask yourself honestly, are you playing your game or someone else's? Because true freedom starts the exact moment you stop comparing and start playing the game on your own terms. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. Until next time, stay focused and stay curious.